Hey guys, it's been a good morning already. Thanks again for being here. Listen, we're going to dive right in. Is there anyone here today that would be honest like me and say, you maybe have some trust issues in your life? I do, I got some. And the word trust, it's a small word, but it's a powerful thing. It's a powerful word. And, trust is a lot like a sandcastle, right? Come on, it's beach season, finally. We're moving on into any beach fans, right? And you've been there with your kids building sandcastles. And, trust is a lot like a sandcastle. Like, it takes a long time to build, but in a moment, kapow, it can be destroyed, right? Like we work and work and work to build trust in our relationships, but like with one wave of indiscretion or a wave of betrayal, or even a wave of criticism, it can take it out. This thing called trust, right? Like we've all been hurt before, probably in our life. We've all been betrayed at some point. We've all been let down by someone that we care deeply about or love, and like maybe it was a dad that left you a long time ago. Like maybe it was an ex-spouse that did something to you, and it's just been super hard for you to, forgive that person. Maybe it's a boss or like a peer at work that sort of kind of threw you under the bus. Maybe it was a best friend that hurt you deeply, right? So like moment after moment and experience after experience, like in our lives, we can develop these trust issues. Like a trust issue is like when I begin to project onto future relationships or future opportunities out there in the horizon. I begin to project onto those relationships the pain from my past, right? It's like I become a little bit like more guarded, right? I don't necessarily trust that you've got the right intentions or the right motives with me, right? Even though you didn't have anything to do with the pain of my past. Right, like I've sort of projected onto you, or you projected onto me. And sometimes, if we're honest, we can begin to project our trust issues onto the relationships around us. And sometimes, if we're most honest, we can project our trust issues onto the most important relationship of all, and that's our relationship with God. So the answer today isn't that we shut down. The answer is that we begin to learn to redirect our trust. Let's find out what God's word says about that. In Proverbs chapter 3, it talks about, and it shares with us that the object of our trust should be God. It says in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, it says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take." Now that's a great passage, right? Many of you grew up in the church, like that's your passage, right? You put it on your coffee cup and you take it to work, and I believe in that passage. Like, I hold on to that passage. In fact, that scripture passage is on a wall in my house. Like, it's a family passage for us, for the Kleiners. But if I'm honest, that passage is not always easy to live out. Right? I mean, there are moments in my life when I struggle to put my trust in the Lord. Can we just be real today? Like, this is the struggle that we have. This is the wrestle that we have. And if you've been a churchgoer for any length of time, or maybe you've been a Jesus follower for a while, like you would probably agree with me that the object of our trust should be God. But maybe you're here today and you've been following Jesus for a while, but you still would say, like, that's my problem. Like God is the reason why I've got some trust issues. Because like I've cried out to him in the past, and he just seems like he doesn't seem to answer, like he doesn't seem to care, he doesn't seem to be around. Like, some of you even wonder if he exists. Now I would hope that most of us in this room believe that God exists. And if you don't, man, I'm really, really glad that you're here today. But those of you that believe God exists, It doesn't change the fact that you and I sometimes don't struggle with why God doesn't intervene. You know what I mean? Like, why does it appear that God seems to intervene sometimes and then sometimes he doesn't? Like, why does it seem like God sort of speaks to us and sort of reassures us or in our chair time and then just sometimes he just seems so silent? Like, what do we do with all that? So there's a prophet, and Adam referenced him prior to me coming out here. He's an Old Testament prophet who actually vocalizes some of these questions that maybe you and I have been afraid to vocalize over the years. And so as Adam said, I want to encourage you to turn in your Bible or maybe open up your Bible app to the book of Habakkuk. A little known book. In fact, up to today, there's probably this many times I've actually talked about that book in my life. He's got a really crazy name, Habakkuk. Let's get it out of our system right now. Come on, say it with me on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Habakkuk. Come on, really loud. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Hopefully you didn't hock a loogie on your neighbor right now because it sort of lends itself to that. Habakkuk. But Habakkuk was a minor prophet who spoke and wrote about 600 years before the life of Jesus. You see, Habakkuk spoke to God on behalf of the people, right? In fact, if you read through the book of Habakkuk, he was sort of vocalizing some of the complaints and the struggles that you and I have today. Like, he was vocalizing some real struggles that the people were feeling, they were sensing. And what Habakkuk says to God is pretty raw. It's pretty real. It's pretty unfiltered if you read it. In fact, look, I want you to look at he comes right out of the gates. He comes out swinging right here in chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. Habakkuk says this, how long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Violence is everywhere. I cry, but you do not come to save. Must I forever see these evil deeds? Why must I watch all this misery? Wherever I look, I see destruction and violence. I'm surrounded by people who love to argue and fight. So apparently they had Facebook back then. You know what I'm talking about? He goes on to say, the law has become paralyzed and there's no justice in the courts. The wicked far outnumber the righteous so that justice has become perverted. And what I love about this passage, while it doesn't seem super uplifting, it's maybe not the greatest passage to let's take out our shorts and flip-flops and let's launch summer. Happy Memorial Day. It's real. Come on, it's raw. He begins to vocalize some things that maybe some of us wonder if we're even allowed to vocalize. He's like, God, where are you in this world that seems to have lost its mind? So guys, our passage today in the book of Habakkuk, it's gonna sort of introduce the question what do you do when what you believe about God, or at least what you wanna believe about God and what you see from God and what you see God allowing, what do you do when those two things don't line up? What do you do in those moments? Well, Habakkuk teaches us in our passage today that we can actually tell God what we're really thinking. We can actually tell God how we're really feeling, no matter how raw it is. God can handle it. In fact, he kind of invites it. Right? Listen, God is pretty secure. He can handle it. There's no way he's allowing what Habakkuk just said in the stuff we just read. There's no way he's allowing that in the pages of a book that still lasts today if he's not a little secure. But God allows it. He actually encourages it. So what Habakkuk is doing throughout the narrative of this book, he's saying, hey, listen, God, this is what I believe about you, or at least this is what I want to believe about you. But man, you're not making it easy on me, you know? Because what I see from you and what I see you allowing, they don't seem to line up. So what Habakkuk is doing is he's wrestling with God. In fact, that's what That's what Habakkuk's name actually means. It means to embrace and to wrestle. And you actually do those things like simultaneously. It's like a picture of two wrestlers, right? And they're just kind of going at it like this, and most of the time when they're wrestling, they're actually embracing. Sometimes they're embracing a little bit too much for my liking, you know what I mean? But it's not this picture of this warm, cuddly embrace like your child. It's this picture of embracing and wrestling at the same time. I love that. So what does it look like to embrace and wrestle? Like it kind of looks like I'm not just gonna blindly pretend that everything in my life is just great right now when it's actually not. Right? I'm gonna wrestle with the tough stuff of life. Or on the other side, I'm not just gonna go through life quickly and come to the conclusion that God doesn't care or that he doesn't have like any power to do anything about my situation. I'm gonna embrace, right? I'm gonna hold on to what I believe is true even though I'm struggling to believe it, right? But at the same time, I'm gonna hold on to God even though I'm not very happy with him right now. You ever been there? I'm gonna embrace and I'm gonna wrestle. Embrace and wrestle. And I think for many of us, myself included, we've thought that when it comes to God, or when it like comes to following Jesus, there's like only two options. Like you either gotta receive him or you gotta reject him. You know what I mean? So if you receive, that means that you've got to like have all your questions answered. Like that means like all the tough stuff in life has got to get resolved. And then when that happens, that's when you'll receive him, right? Or like I've got all these questions about God and I've got all this pain in my life that it seems to be like still there and I've got all these unresolved issues in my life, so I'm just going to go ahead and reject him. You know? We either receive or we reject. Listen, those two ways, neither of those ways is what God invites us into. I'd like to suggest that there's a third way. It's not just blindly receiving or rigidly rejecting. There's a middle way. And I'd like to suggest it's maybe even the best way, or maybe even the only way. It's embrace and wrestle. It's like I'm not gonna let go of you, God, but I don't understand you in this moment, right? Or like, God, I'm not just gonna just completely release you, God, but yeah, at the same time, like I'm not very happy with you right now. And Pathways, it's through these wrestle moments that God drives us to a deeper intimacy with him, a deeper trust, and should I even say stability in the midst of trauma and turmoil in our lives. You know, for some of us, man, maybe we've wondered if we could like even have a question like, is it okay to question God? Like maybe you grew up in a church or you grew up like in a household where they said that's not okay, whether it was directly or indirectly. Maybe it was like, hey, if you question God, you don't have enough faith, right? Or if you question God, you're disrespecting God and God deserves respect. Man, can I just say it's okay to question God? Like I'd like to say it's maybe even more than okay. And the reason that I can say that so confidently today is that this question is found all over the Bible. In fact, if you look at the book of Psalms in which David wrote, you guys heard David before, and David actually, he took the raw pain in his life that was going on in his head and his heart, and he actually put it to lyrics. He put it to song. Like some of the songs we sing today, the tunes that we have, many of the songs on our Spotify playlists are inspired by this idea of David wrestling and embracing. Right? In fact, like 1/3 of the Psalms, and there's like 150 of them, 50 Psalms are written with this underlying theme of questioning God. You know, I think the reason that David put his the real raw stuff of his life to song is because there's something about music that speaks to the human heart. You know what I mean? Like it moves the heart. Like it's why I've shared with you before that sometimes when I'm struggling with something, you'll find me with like headphones on, right? My worship tunes. You'll find me with headphones just listening to worship music. And many times you're gonna find me like at the gym, at the free throw line, just kind of shooting free throws, struggling, talking to God, wrestling. But I'm attempting to embrace who God is in my life in those moments. Listen, that's the reason we do music here every single weekend. You know what I mean? You see, we want God to speak to your head, but we also want God to speak to your heart. Even more so, we want God to speak to your heart. And music's a great way to do that, you know? Listen, our music time at church is not a performance. You know what I mean? Like these teams up here, they're giving you and I an opportunity to get real with God and wrestle with the pains that you and I have in our life by embracing the reality of who God is. That's why we do music. So David, he speaks from his heart, the raw stuff. He puts them to song. Like we see whole books of the Bible that are kind of have this underlying theme, Jeremiah and Job and Lamentations. It's not like just a footnote. It's like the thesis of the book. It's the question like, God, can you really be trusted? And if so, why are you allowing all this stuff in this world into my life? Like more than anyone else in the Bible you saw with David, it's like one verse in Psalms, he's like, God, where are you? And like the very next verse is like, God, you're so close, I can barely breathe. And you're like, which is it, David? And I think if David was here, he'd say, it's both. It's both. I'm embracing and I'm wrestling. I'm wrestling with the natural, but I'm embracing the supernatural, right? I'm wrestling with what I see and experience in the world right around me, but I'm embracing that there's a bigger story and a big God at work in my life. You know what I mean? It's wrestling why firefighter Mitch Lundgaard was shot while just simply responding to a medical emergency. Like, why? But at the same time, it's attempting to embrace that God has a bigger story at play. You know what I mean? It's wrestling with the fact that both my mom and dad died of horrible sicknesses in their early 50s. I wrestle with that. But it's also attempting to embrace God in my pain and my confusion at the same time. You know, it's attempting to like sing worship songs at my mom and dad's funeral, right? While I'm crying my guts out, struggling with the why of the reality that they're gone from this earth at such a young age. It's wrestling and embracing. You ever been there? Come on, have you ever had a wrestle why with God moment like me? You see, here's what I'm learning. It's one thing to have a season of wrestling with an issue. It's one thing to have a season of embracing or a moment of embracing, maybe when you come to church. But what I've been learning, it's a whole new way. It's a whole new other thing to wrestle and embrace at the same time. At least for me, it's a new way. And it may be the way that some of us today can find freedom and move forward in a deeper relationship with God. But before we get there, let's get back real quick to Habakkuk. So what we learned from the first passage, right? Habakkuk, he's like wrestling. He's just kind of telling God what's up, and God's like, hey, hit me with your best shot, right? Right? Like, go ahead and vocalize your frustration and your questions. He's like, I can handle it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what God says back to us or what happens is something we necessarily like or even understand, right? We see it in verse 5 of chapter 1. Can we read it together? After Habakkuk lets him have it, here's God's reply to him. The Lord replied, look around the nations. Look and be amazed. And I'd be like, all right, sweet, here it is. Finally, God, I got your attention. You're going to come through for me. Here we go. But then he says, for I'm doing something in your day, something you wouldn't believe even if someone told you about it. I'd be like, all right, God, tell me, right? Tell me what you're gonna do, right? But then look what it says in verse 6. It says, I am raising up the Babylonians. Now, I don't know if you know about the Babylonians, but they're like the New England Patriots of the day, right? Like horrible, rotten cheaters, right? It goes on to say, a cruel and violent people. They'll march across the world and conquer other lands. They are notorious for their cruelty and do whatever they like. And I'd be like, what's up with that? That's good news, right? Like, God, I don't think you heard me correctly here, right? I'm asking for you to come through. Like, are you gonna rescue us? I'm like, this is the news you bring? God's not done. Check it out. He's got more. Verse 9. He says, on they come, all bent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind, sweeping captives ahead of them like sand. They scoff at kings and princes and scorn all their fortresses. They simply pile ramps of earth against their walls and capture them. Verse 11 says, they sweep past like the wind and are gone, but they are deeply guilty, for their own strength is their God. Man, I don't know about you, but I could think of some other things in that I could have said in that moment to bring comfort. You know what I mean? Like, God seems to be really bad at that, you know? So what's he doing here? I want us to catch this. This is so important for us to understand. Listen, God is not sending all this trouble, trauma, and turmoil. God's actually preparing them for it, and there's a difference. In other words, God is preparing them for the trouble that they may experience. Come on, have you ever experienced some trouble? I know I have. You know what I mean? Like Jesus would actually later come to earth, and he would say, it's recorded in John 16, he would say, in this world you will have trouble. But he goes on to say, hey, I want you to be encouraged. I've overcome the world. But he gave us a heads up. Like he promised it, right? But God says, take heart. I've overcome the world. I'm gonna redeem this thing. You know, God says, listen, I've come to redeem the pain that you and I are going through. Listen, I'm not any happier about it than you are, but I've actually told you how this thing goes. And if you think about it, that's what like the whole Bible is all about, the narrative of the Bible, right? That there's a God and he created us out of love, right? And something went terribly wrong and he's done something about it. And one day he's gonna come back and he's gonna fix it all. So he says, you hold on. But that doesn't mean we don't wrestle, right? Like, it doesn't mean we don't struggle in the meantime. Like, do you know that the biblical word for this whole idea of embrace and wrestle, you know what that is? It's worship. That's what it is, it's worship. In fact, let's see what Habakkuk's response here is. Like, even before like God comes through for him, even before he's rescued, let's look at what Habakkuk does in verse 12 and 13. He says, O Lord my God, my Holy One, you who are eternal, surely you do not plan to wipe us out. It's almost like, God, you're not gonna do that, are you? Listen to these words of faith before he even has any real reason to believe this. He says, O Lord, our rock, you've sent these Babylonians to correct us, to punish us for our many sins, but you are pure and cannot stand the sight of evil. Will you wink at their treachery? Should you be silent while the wicked swallow up people more righteous than they? Do you see it? Do you see what he's doing here? He's wrestling with God, but he's also embracing God. Like, he's vocalizing the very things that he's struggling to believe, right? And he's saying, God, I'm gonna hold on to you. Like you're my rock. Even though I don't fully know how this whole deal is gonna play out, I'm gonna trust you. You see, there's a word here for what Habakkuk is doing. It's a process. The wrestling and embracing process, it builds an authenticity in our lives. You know what I mean? That's what it means to be authentic. It's the real deal, that you're not just like this pie in the sky, like everything's all good, it's all great, it's all okay, all fine. And the other side, it's not just that you're bitter and angry and frustrated and resentful and like, there is no God. No, no, no. You embrace and you wrestle and you worship. You embrace and you wrestle and you worship and you sing out and you declare what you're struggling to believe. And you're trusting that God's gonna produce an authenticity in your life that's irresistible to the people around you. You know what I mean? Like the world is so turned off with just Christians that fake it, right? It's like we're smiling all the time and we're just happy. We came to church, it's all good, right? God has called us to an authentic Christian faith in our pursuit of Him. So you know what that looks like? It's like, yeah, this life is painful sometimes. This hurts. And yeah, this even sucks sometimes. But I'm just not gonna throw hope out the window, right? I'm gonna hold on to God even when it doesn't seem to make sense. I'm gonna trust that He's doing something here. God says, hey, would you just trust me? Would you hold on? I'm doing some work here. God says, would you continue to embrace? You can wrestle, it's okay, but trust me. That's exactly what Habakkuk does. I love this. Can we go to chapter 3 of the book of Habakkuk? Before Habakkuk fully understands, like before God fully comes through, let's look at his words starting in verse 17 of chapter 3. He says, even though the fig trees have no blossoms, and there are no grapes on the vines, even though the olive crop fails and the fields lie empty and barren, even though the flocks die in the fields and the cattle barns are empty, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. And you're sitting there going, why, Habakkuk? Why? But see his response, I will be joyful in the God of my salvation. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes me as sure-footed as a deer, able to tread upon the heights. And what I love about this is exactly what we just read a little bit ago in chapter 1. Like Habakkuk, he's gotten raw, he's gotten real, he's gotten unfiltered. So he's not pretending that everything is just okay. And yet at the same time, what's he doing? He's fighting for joy. You know? He's fighting and he's saying, listen, I'm not just gonna throw in the towel and say that there's no reason for all of this. That in the midst of my struggle, man, that's when I need God the most. When life has got me sort of rocked back on my heels, that's when I need to be as sure-footed as I can be. So Habakkuk's response to God, what he's doing here is he's worshiping. He's embracing and he's wrestling and he's declaring what he's struggling to believe. I love what Paul writes. He writes about this in 2 Corinthians 12. He says, God's power is made perfect in your weakness. Because that's when you and I need him the most, right? So God says you're gonna go through a valley, and I wish that I could rescue you from every single valley, but he says, I'm gonna do you one better. I'll walk with you through your valley. Right? And as you and I go through the valley, he says, man, I'm gonna help you build an intimacy with me as you embrace and you wrestle. Listen, every single one of us is either in or has been in or will be in a valley. The Bible talks a lot about valleys. Maybe one of the most recognized passages in Psalm 23:4. It says, even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. Some of you probably can finish this with me, right? For you are with me. Come on, can you say that out loud with me? With me. 1, 2, 3, with me. Come on, say a little louder. 1, 2, 3, with me. Come on, two of the most powerful words in all of scriptures. And some of you are here today and you're like, God, I just need you to be with me. Like maybe you're here and you're feeling a little bit lonely. Maybe you're here today and you've got a ton of doubt, like you've got a ton of God-sized questions, you know? Like maybe you're here and you're feeling insecurity and fear and anxiety and depression. And man, can I just say, man, I'm right there with you. And maybe today, maybe together, we could take those wrestle moments that you and I have, and we can allow them to drive us toward a deep intimacy with God. Like maybe even thinking all along your whole life, I just gotta be okay with it all and receive it. Or maybe you'd be like, I'm not okay with it and I'm gonna reject it. Man, can I suggest or maybe even introduce to you for the first time a third way, a better way, maybe a new way for some of us? Maybe today you need to embrace a new worship style. It's called wrestle and embrace. And as we embrace God and as you wrestle, man, we're gonna develop an intimacy with God that withstands the trouble of this world, you know? And in return, it's gonna produce an authenticity within you that's irresistible to people all around you. So today, I want us to practice this. I want us to do what Habakkuk did. Can we stand to our feet all across this room? And I want us to worship God, you know? And maybe you're here today and you've seen people kind of lifting their hands and singing and smiling, and you're thinking, wow, look at them. They're so holy, right? Like, look at their perfect life. Man, I want you to know, at least for me, it's the exact opposite. You know what I mean? Like, when does water taste the best? When you're thirsty, right? Like, when does food satisfy you the most? When you're hungry, right? When do we have our best worship? At least for me, it's when I'm broken, when I'm in pain, when I'm struggling, when I'm wrestling. Listen, there are many things we want to move forward together as a church, and this is one of them. That we would become more and more authentic in our worship, that we wrestle and embrace and declare. We declare the things that we desperately desire to be true in our lives. And sometimes we think when we lift our hands, it's like we gotta have our act together. We're just crying out and trying to embrace a God that loves us so much. You know, for me, when my kids were younger, it was learning how to walk time, and they'd kind of waddle out. And I remember their posture. You kind of been there as a dad or a mom, and like, it's almost like, Daddy, I think I got this. I'm not sure I got this. But it's almost like, Daddy, I'm really glad you're there to help me get this. And I'm really glad you're there to help me when I fall and pick me up. Listen, our hands lifted high doesn't mean we're bragging, it means we're crying out to our God. And so today, I'd love for us to worship God in an authentic way, wherever you're at. In the midst of your doubt and your fear and your insecurity, man, there is a light. Even though you may not see it in front of your face, there is a light that wants to penetrate through your darkest valleys.